So, welcome everyone to the Legend of Heroes Trails, a quick guide and summary. Now, before we go any further, I would like to note this PowerPoint was made before Trails Through Daybreak came out. This video, however, is being recorded um, well, a good week or less than a week after it already came out. So, um, it this PowerPoint is a little bit outdated, but I would like to think of it as this is just for the arcs that are completed. So this is the Legend of Heroes Trails, a quick guide and summary. And I would just like to note that this is incredibly deceiving. There are not this little games in the series. But yeah, and we shall move on. What's the Legend of Heroes and what does Trails have to do with it? If being completely honest, the only thing that it has in common is that it is the roots where the series comes from. It is made by the same company known as Nihon Falcom, or Falcom for short. Trails isn't really a spin-off. It's essentially a sub-series to the Legend of Heroes series starting in 1989. Before Trails, there was only 5 main entries in the series. The first 2 were spin-offs of the Dragon Slayer series. Those aren't important for the point of this. Next 3 games are just a smaller scale look at what Falcon would do with Trails, known as the Gagov trilogy. These games consisted of Prophecy of the Moonlight Witch, A Tear of Vermilion, and Song of the Ocean, being known as Legend of Heroes 3, 4, and 5, respectively. 3 games in that trilogy are not standalone. You need to play them in order to understand anything at all. This is, and as I said, that's just a small scale of what that would be, of what would end up being the Trails series. But Legend of Heroes is not important to understand Trails at all. It's just the series roots. Really? Are we really explaining Dragon Slayer? I just said it's not important for this presentation. I guess if you really need an explanation, it's a very important series for Falcom and the RPG genre entirely. Being the first action RPG series starting in 1984, it predates Final Fantasy from 1987 and Dragon Quest in 1986, which were the pioneers of turn-based RPGs, making what people called their dated part of the RPG genre, which that's a topic for another day. I'm not going into this. Younger than the pioneers of the action RPG genre, which these days somewhat has more mass appeal, but again, not something I'm going to get into. Other than The Legend of Heroes, Trails, where Dragon Slayer has spawned was the basis for the Xanadu series in 1984, and the East series in 1987, with their most recent releases being Tokyo Xanadu in 2015 and East 10 Nordics in 2023. I'm going by Japanese release dates here, by the way. Because the Western release dates, especially for Trails, are a mess, and I'm not going to get into that. They may or may not be a future video and presentation on those in the future, but this is the end of the detour. Well, without all that out of the way, welcome to the continent of Zemuria. Now, again, as of now, this map is outdated because we actually have a bit of the regions covered in Trails Through Daybreak and stuff, but for the point of this presentation being, like, the 3 arcs that are complete at the moment, this is all we need. So, yeah. And now we have the LaBelle arc, which, like, in its entirety, is Legend of Heroes 4. And that consists of Trails in the Sky, Trails in the Sky SC, and Trails in the Sky the Third. I will be ignoring the Legend of Heroes part of the title just for the sake of simplicity. I don't want to be repeating Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, and so on. I will explain the naming scheme for these when we start covering the individual games, but for now, we're moving on. The Crossbell arc. Yes, Crossbell is just this little blue bit in the middle, not these two. And that is very important. And it consists of Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure. Uh, don't ask me why this arc is named, whereas everything else is like 1, 2, 3, 4, and onwards, and blah blah blah. Um, that's just how this arc is presented, and once you actually play through it, uh, the naming scheme does make sense. But for now, Erebonia. Yes, this is a big place. Um, yeah, I am zooming it in to make it bigger, but yeah, we have covering the eastern side of the Erebonian arc, we have Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. Covering the western side, we have, as well as revisiting Crossbell, we have Cold Steel 3, Cold Steel 4, and Trails into Reverie. This arc is actually what gets a lot of people into the series, which is good in its own way. But yeah, we'll get into that later. So now, we are starting to summarize the game, starting with Trails in the Sky FC. The first game in the Trails series, as well as this, which was my starting point, was Trails in the Sky FC, which stands for First Chapter. Starts off with two youngsters, the protagonist Estelle Bright and her adopted sibling Joshua Bright, just coming into the age of being recruited into the Bracer Guild as junior bracers to do odd jobs around the Kingdom of LaBelle in hopes of eventually becoming senior bracers. But they have to do this while investigating the disappearance of their father, Cassius Bright, and a mysterious black ornament. I will get to what those are in a bit. The game overall is pretty chill and laid back. It's just a game to introduce you to the cast and the world while still having a bit of an engaging plot before you leaves you on a cliffhanger to get into the real heavy-hitting story in the next game. Cliffhangers are a series staple. Get used to those. Trails in the Sky SC. Yes, that is right. The first game ends on a cliffhanger, which practically begs you to play the next game. Trails in the Sky SC, which stands for Second Chapter, it picks up literally hours after the first game leaves off, and it's actually quite difficult to summarize without going into spoilers. To put it simply, a secret organization starts to rear its ugly head while Estelle and the gang go around trying to stop them to protect LaBelle at all costs. This combined with the previous game, it's probably the best character-driven narrative I've ever experienced. If you, like me, came into the series due to hearing about its large narrative scope and its very well-written characters, comparable to why I love Xenoblade so much, this is mainly talking about the first game, because at the time I got into the series, I had only really played the first game. I knew the plots and stuff for the other two games, but I didn't have the means of playing them at the time. But yeah, you will find something very special here. You could even stop playing the series here, since these two games do make a pretty much complete narrative, but there are things that are left out in the open for the final in this game in the arc to cover. Trails in the Sky the Third. So Trails in the Sky the Third is less of an actual sequel, and the title does kind of resemble that, because it doesn't follow this naming scheme of the other two. It just goes by it's the third. But yeah, it's less of an actual sequel, more of an epilogue type of game, similar to something like Future Connected in the Xenoblade remaster on Switch. It follows Kevin Graham, who was actually introduced in the previous game as a wandering priest for the Septian Church, which I have neglected to mention. While I will not mention anything more about Kevin because spoilers, I will say that it has very intriguing, somewhat self-contained story in a pocket dimension type thing, with some very relevant side content, which sets up things for future arcs. The game is overall shorter due to its focus on more gameplay and dungeon crawling, while not exactly sidelining the story, just not giving you as many walls of text as a Trails game normally would. Uh, I will get to that. Oh dear. Yes, I did drop some terminology that is a core part of this world. I'll quickly sum them up here. Augments. This is what are essentially the engines powered by quartz for technology that powers up Septium of Zemuria. It runs on orbital energy, which comes from Septium veins. Think of it like materia, which comes from Mako energy in Final Fantasy VII, except not harmful to the environment. This isn't the only similarity Augment and Quartz has to materia, but that will have to wait until the gameplay section. Um, and the Septian Church. This is the religion of the Trail series that worships the goddess known as Adios. Yes, it is pronounced Adios. I've gone around every version of pronunciation, and both the Japanese and the English pronounce it Adios. When initially playing the first set of games that didn't have voice acting, I thought it was Idios or something like that, but it's Adios. And before it starts raising red flags, don't be alarmed, it's just a religion that takes place in this world. Not like anything that you would normally find in JRPGs, so no need to worry about needing to fight a goddess that these people worship. Trails from Zero. And now on to the autonomous state of Crossbar. This game follows the young detective Lloyd Bannings as he joins the Crossbar Police Department. But he gets assisted to a division gets assigned, sorry, reading, I wrote this thing, known as the Special Support Section, SSS for short, which is put together to help the common people. Sound familiar? While also unearthing the ugly and politically corrupt side of Crossbow's government, as it is under constant pressure from Erebony and Calvard, being sandwiched right between the two powerhouses. Calvard is where the Daybreak games take place, but again, not important for this. This game is a fantastic start to this arc in the series. Not only are you shown the main issue in the conflict from the beginning, but you're also introduced to a main cast of playable characters from the beginning. A lot of tasks you end up doing involve quite a bit of investigation sections, which is something I personally love as an aspiring detective myself. As just someone who loves detective stories and games. Well, this is the best start to an arc. There are a couple things that prevent it from being the ideal entry point to the series I will get into later. Trails to Azure. Like the Sky SC, it's going to be a bit difficult to get into Trails to Azure without spoiling all the big plot points, which will be a recurring theme to any of the sequel games in the series, since they're essentially a whole second half of the respective series. All that can be mentioned is that the events of Trails from Zero left Crossville in a fragile position to be taken advantage of by the two large countries for a much larger conflict to arise. This is my favorite game in the series due to the scope of the conflict of this game, and seeing the effects this game leaves on the rest of the series going forward just makes me love it even more. I would definitely put it up there as one of, if not the best JRPG endgame I have played ever. I didn't write it in here, but one thing that sets this arc back from being like good on its own is that this game especially brings in a lot of stuff from the Trails in the Sky games, as well as one of the bigger plot points in Zero. Also, its big emotional moment is reliant on you knowing the characters from the Sky trilogy. So, The Legend of Naiad to Boundless Trails. Now, I didn't detail this when explaining the arc, and there's not much I can say about this, since it's an action RPG spin-off of the series close in gameplay to Falcom's East series. This game is completely cut off from the rest of the series and taking place a large but vague time before the main series even started. Now, I know I said that it is cut off. It is. It pretty much is, but there are people that think that it will become relevant in its plot eventually. But we just don't know that as of yet. But this game features a young knight Herschel as he finds a fairy that goes by the name of Noi to explore another world from a looming threat. I have a lot less to say about this game, not because it's bad in any way, but more because this game puts more of a focus on being an action RPG, with level structure and platforming fitting for a game that originally released on the PSP. It's a good game, quite fun, especially if you don't have time to play for hours on end per session. I would recommend this to someone who only wants to play one game to get an idea of the writing style of the series, without fully committing to such a large amount of games to play. Trails of Cold Steel. This is actually where a lot of people in the community started off. But yeah. So here we are. 5 games in build-up, and we finally get to see what an oppressive place Erebonia really is. So, Trails of Cold Steel now presents us an anime high school setting? Yeah, that's right. Turns out the massive empire of Erebonia isn't as grim as we thought. This game follows Man Schwarzer as he gets assigned to a class in Thor's military academy. But while classes 1 and 2 are for nobles, and classes 3 to 5 are for commodores, the class we follow is Class 7. Don't worry about that they missed Class 6. That is just... They acknowledge it. Not important, though. Which ends up being a mixture of both. The class enjoys their student life and goes on field studies to learn more about their country, and to help the common person, since the Bracer Guild has much less of a presence here. And bear witness to the conflict between the Reformers faction and the Noble faction. Which... yeah, politics is a thing in this series, I forgot to mention. This series is very heavy on politics. So, yeah. Overall, this game is at an all-time low with its pacing. So while the first Trails in the Sky game is considered a 40-hour prologue, this game is more of a 70-hour prologue. And I think in some circles is labeled as the longest first episode of a Gundam series. Don't worry about it. While it may seem like a bad thing, it really aids in delivering the setting of this world, or well, this country, and will make it all the more impactful when that typical Trails cliffhanger hits. Trails of Cold Steel 2. Yeah. Again, not much I can say apart from the results of the previous game leaves Trails of Cold Steel 2 set in the middle of a civil war while Reen has to search for his classmates who are split up across Erebonia while trying to settle the conflict as it hurts many of the innocents. And this arc is pretty much just a mecha. I will go no further into it. I would like to note that these two games chronologically take place during the same period of time as the two games set in Crossbell, so you can really feel the effects of them here, especially if you played the games prior to this. But it's not a requirement, as you can still fully enjoy those two games without any prior knowledge of the series. Can't say that for the rest of the arc, though. There is also a bit at the end of this game that kind of is just as if it was a section ripped out from the previous arc put into this game, but we'll leave that for later. Trails of Cold Steel 3. I will just put this out there. No matter what NIS and Falcom says, do not start your journey through the series here. This was when the series changed publishers in the West, so they tried to do so to get more sales out of the game. Just to note, Zero and Azure are also under NIS, but they only got released in the West after Cold Steel 4 did, and before Reverie. So when NIS says, "Oh, this is the full set of games," that's only the set of games that they have the licensing to. So don't worry about that. Now that, as long as you have a PC, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Not only is this halfway through an arc, this game is where the series starts bringing everything from the previous arcs into play. This gets even more so in the next game. Trails of Cold Steel 3 returns back to the school setting of the first game in the arc, except our beloved Reen Schwarzer is an instructor at Thor's new branch campus, where he has to teach new Class 7. Almost like Byleth in Three Houses, but we won't get into that, because that's the only comparison I can make to Fire Emblem. Again, can't say much else without spoilers. I like to call this the Avengers Infinity War of the series for a good reason. So does the entire community. Get into that a bit later, somewhat. Trails of Cold Steel 4. Also, I would just like to say, the cover art for this, cool as hell. I just love it. I'm glad that the Steam page is also just this. The library page, because I like seeing that. Welcome to the Avengers Endgame of the series, Trails of Cold Steel 4, with the subtitle End of Saga in the Japanese title. The English translations tend to drop subtitles. Don't worry about it. It concludes everything to do with the threat of Erebonia has been for so long. Stakes will never be higher, and returning heroes join to bring down an ultimate threat. Sorry for the extremely vague synopsis, but there is literally nothing I can say about this game without spoiling pretty much the entire series for you, especially the Cold Steel arc. And because this is a narrative with a prerequisite of needing to play a whole 8 other games to be able to understand a thing, such as why in Adios' name Reen has white hair now. Yes, this is Reen. Don't worry about it. Trails into Reverie. Like in Sky the Third, Trails into Reverie is an epilogue game. Except, I will note that it does have more of a story than Trails in the Sky the Third. Because the more gameplay-centered focus is kind of a separate part of the game. Anyway, but while it does count as being a part of the Erebonia arc, it actually serves as the epilogue for the Crossbell arc at the same time. As such, there isn't one main character, and there aren't just 2 either. There's actually 3. To make a comparison, it works kind of like how Fire Emblem Echoes handles its 2 protagonist stories. The game follows Reen Schwarzer as he takes his class to his hometown for a vacation. Lloyd Bannings, as he tries to liberate the Crossbell, and the mysterious figure known as C, with not much I can say about. The game is less about wrapping up plot points from Erebonia arc, aside from Crossbell's liberation, but more on wrapping up character arcs for those who need it. Also, like Sky the Third, it leaves some things open for the next arc in the series to pick up where this leaves off, which is Daybreak. I am not covering that. I keep saying that, but I'm just not covering. I'm sorry. This does make this presentation outdated. But even in Japan, I don't think we have the full length of the Calvert arc. But yeah, I'm not going into that. Combat! First of all, unless you're playing Nayata, this combat is turn-based with a turn order located on the left. Randomly, some turn bonuses will appear, such as initial attack or guaranteed crits. Positioning is also something as some attacks do AoE, area of effect. The first 5 games use a grid for positioning, everything afterwards uses pre-positioning. With range, but yeah. One of the things to consider are arts, which are the names for spells. It takes a turn to select a spell, you have to wait for the casting turn, so that'll be a strategic element to consider. Arts use the EP meter. Crafts are character-specific skills, also arts crafts, that use the CP meter. They come out immediately, but normally have an additional delay before the character can act again, usually. There is one example in the series that is not the case, but they are just considered just broken, like a comparison. Anyway, CP is gained by taking or dealing damage, and getting at least 100, with a limit of 200, lets you use the character's S-Craft, which is basically a limit break in the Final Fantasy series. The difference is you can use these to interrupt the turn order. For example, get a crit attack. This is known as an S-Break. Now, I will note, this looks a lot like the Persona layout, well, for 5 and 3 Reload, and whatever Atlas is doing these days. Technically, Atlas wanted to do this back in these games, but the PS Vita didn't have the buttons to do this. There's not much apart from word from the developers that supports this, so it's interesting to think about, but it's whatever. Augment. Like FF7, these are how you get your spells. Unlike FF7, none of the normal quartz level up, which makes things so much less tedious. I do have it out for FF7 a bit. As much as I like that game's narrative. Not my favorite. It's fun. That's besides the point. I'm not a big Final Fantasy guy. In the first 5 games, the spells you get would depend on the Sabbath value of the quartz. Everything afterwards goes by giving you the spells with the name of the quartz, unless it has a number, which normally means it it buffs a particular stat or has a chance of inflicting a status effect. Trails to Azure introduced Master Quartz, which gives you certain spells as you level them up throughout the games, and also buff certain stats. They have unique effects and give you powerful spells when the levels max out, that being 5. Although that number has increased in, I believe, Cold Steel 3 and 4. When I wrote this, I was going off of Azure. I didn't experience the full length of Cold Steel 3 and 4 at the time. But starting from Cold Steel 3, you also get an additional slot for Master Quartz, which isn't the full length of if it was the main slot, but anyway, on to the next thing. So, now on to the big question. Where do I start? The pros and cons. I'll be doing pros and cons for all of these starting points. Excellent character-driven narrative. Has the best protagonist, which is Estelle. This is not up for debate. If you disagree, I'm gonna have to tell Estelle that, and she's not gonna be happy. Playing in the Order Falcom intended it to be seen. Assuming you go from the Sky Trilogy to Crossbelt to Cold Steel. Getting to see references to previous games along with knowing the returning characters. Again, assuming you're playing in the actual Japanese release order. Cons, long way to go before you get to anything recent, which is even more sort of a thing now, considering that Daybreak is the new arc. Old PC graphics, and this is only on PC, but in terms of the kind of PC that'll run, it runs on basically anything. Don't worry about it, it's fine. It is a little slow to start. As I said, the first game is essentially a 40-hour prologue. But I like the first game. Don't worry about it. Also, this and the next arc don't have English voice acting. Which I forgot to mention. The Sky games do have Japanese voice acting. You have to mod them into the PC versions. Which is simple enough to do. But, yeah. Trials from Zero as a starting point. There are only 2 games, so you can just knock these 2 out. You immediately get an engaging premise from the start. It is on every modern platform aside from Xbox. Sorry, Xbox, no one cares about you. It has an excellent and complete story. Cons, a character arc from Sky finishes here, which removes the impact. Even if you decide to go back. May not recognize returning characters. Especially in Azure. Same looking graphics as Sky Trilogy. Now you to Boundless Trails. Don't need to commit to a full series. If you enjoy this but don't want to go further, cut off from the rest of the series. Fun action combat if you don't like turn-based combat, but that does mean that you just won't enjoy the rest of the series. It is on every modern platform. But yeah, if you don't enjoy turn-based combat, just go play the East series. It's very fun. Cons may not sell you on getting into the larger series. Inconsistent gameplay on the rest of the series. Yeah, as I said, just go play the East games if you prefer action games. I don't even need to bother mentioning it. Also another good series, and each game is pretty much standalone. There are references to, like, whatever game came out beforehand, but, like, you don't need them. PSP graphics. This is just, like, full 3D model PSP graphics, and it looks a bit dated, but again, for someone like me who does not give a crud about graphics, you should be fine. Trails of Cold Steel. It is a sort of soft reboot of the series, and as I've said multiple times, this was where a lot of people in the Trails and Falcom community got into the series. If you like the social elements in Persona, you might like this. It is a bit different, and you don't need to engage it if you want to get, like, character arcs. Because character arc is still definitely mainly part of the story. The social elements is just like, you get a sense of what they do in their day-to-day life and how they're doing and some of their backstory. Don't worry about it. The first two games are on PC and PS4, with the other two being on every modern platform. Again, except Xbox, because screw Xbox. Cons. Highly recommended to start playing through the 5 games beforehand, especially before starting Cold Steel 3. I'm watching you. Estelle will beat your ass if you don't. This is very slow to start. Sometimes comes off as anime in the worst ways, so think Xenoblade 2. Not much else I can say apart from that. It's not as bad, but it's definitely a very high school anime tropey in certain aspects. Okay, like mainly in like Cold Steel 1 and 3, since they're set in the schools, as well as like certain character archetypes. But in my opinion, all the characters are very well written, apart from some that just don't get too much screen time. But anyway, Trails of Cold Steel 3. Creator of the series and NIS said you could, I guess? You literally will not understand a thing if you haven't played at least Cold Steel 1 and 2. And it's highly recommended to play the other two arcs before as well. Good game, though. Just don't play it first. Reason to play. Amazing characters. Yeah, because, like, character arcs can go all the way from, like, the beginning to, like, several arcs later, if they are returning. You can see that they can take their time with character arcs. It doesn't feel bloated, but it definitely feels a lot more natural than a game that needs to wrap up all of its character threads in one game. You get one of the best examples of long-form storytelling in gaming. The world feels like it is alive with how much you will see the politics that it gets affected. Things that happen in one game actually has a large impact on every future game. If you decide to go from start to finish, you will constantly have this series to fall back on if you play another game while taking a break from the series. Oh, and actually, the music that you're hearing in the background, this is all just from a playlist that's just relaxing tracks from the series. But there are some bangers in this series. Like, think Xenoblade levels of music, and you're good. Like, especially like Xenoblade 2 and 3, maybe, in terms of their music. Just really good. You've got lots of good relaxing stuff and lots of good, like, really hard-hitting tracks. Now, you want to know the real reasons to play. You got your waifus and Estelle here. Estelle, again, the best protagonist, so don't at me. You got your husbandos. You got your memes. I'll go through them very slowly. Somewhat. I'm not reading them out. And the in between them both. Olivier Lenheim. He is the in between of husbando and complete meme and shitpost. He is best boy. Now, with all that said and done, go play Trails. Thank you for watching this. I'm sorry if it took a while. Yeah, I'm sorry for going off track multiple times, and if there were some typos in the presentation, that is my bad. I definitely overlooked them. I've tried to fix them, but oh well. Thank you for looking at this, and, yeah. See you around.